If you lived in my home, you would hear me say, "Don't throw that away," over and over again. But today, I'm going to tell you a story using that phrase that's a little different, and it connects back to a story you heard me tell a few weeks ago about girlfriends. Today, you can learn vocabulary and remember it with this story. Welcome to English Coach 3Ts. I'm Tanya, and if we haven't met before, I teach here on YouTube, and you can also find me on Instagram. And I'm the creator of my More English Club with Tanya, where you can get a free help sheet or a free practice sheet to go along with this video so that you can learn more from the words and phrases I use today and help with remembering them. The story I have to share with you today is about a group of girlfriends that I had when my girls, my children, were quite a bit younger. I think that Talia was only a year or two old, and Tiana would have been about 3 years older than that. And I told the story of this group of friends who were all single moms in that video I mentioned before that I will link above and put down in the description as well. You don't have to watch that video first, but you might want to, and then come back and watch this video, or go ahead and watch this video and then watch that one afterwards. Both ways, you're going to learn a lot of great words and phrases that you can use in English conversation. So one of the things that I mentioned in that video is that these girlfriends and I would have a clothing exchange, meaning we would trade clothing. So instead of throwing out our old clothing or even donating it to someone else, we would all bring our clothing we had already used but we didn't want, or it didn't fit us anymore, to an exchange is what we called it, a trade. So how did we do this? Every couple of months, one of us would say, "Hey, I've got a lot of things for an exchange or a lot of things for a trade piling up," meaning that every time we had something, it could be clothing, but it might be something else. We called it a clothing exchange, but it might have been maybe a pan from our kitchen or a book we were finished reading. One of our kids' toys, one of our kids' one of our clothing from one of our kids, or it could be something from the garage or even outdoors, maybe even just a plant. And we would get a lot of that piled up. In other words, we might put it in one area of a room or in a bag until there was a lot of it. And then one of us would say, "I have a lot of things piled up for an exchange. Let's set a date." Set a date means let's decide upon a date and put it on our calendars. So in a couple of weeks, one of us, well, actually before a couple of weeks, one of us would say, "Hey, let's all come to my place," meaning my house or my apartment. "Let's all come to my place." And we would all bring something for a potluck. Potlucks are super common, very popular, very prevalent in the United States, where everyone brings something to eat. In this case, we weren't necessarily going to have a meal, but somebody might bring like a main dish, like pasta or something like that. But typically we all brought some kind of snack food or appetizers that we could share. And we would all go to one of the yayas, which is what we called ourselves, one of their places, one of their homes. And then we would bring all of the stuff that we had for the exchange. And usually all or most of our kids would come with us because, like I said before, we were all single moms. And the kids would play and run and have a great time. And the moms would all lay all the clothing items out, typically on the floor, maybe on a table, and we would all browse the items. So much like on your computer, you can browse websites, to browse the items when you're shopping in a store or in an exchange like this, you're just looking at all of the different items, looking to see if maybe I want that, maybe I want that. But in this case, part of what was happening is we were looking for things that we might want that someone else maybe doesn't want. Or if someone else might want it, we would say, does anybody want this vase or this book? And usually it's just a form of courtesy, at least in this culture, to say, oh no, you keep it. No, you have it, even if you really want it. In our culture, this is a courtesy. Now, it's starting to change culturally for us. If you really wanted that book too, or you've been waiting for that shirt, you knew your friend had that shirt and you hoped that it would come to the clothing exchange, you might say, oh, I've really had my eye on that. Meaning, I've really wanted that. I've really been looking to have that. In that case, the other person who maybe wasn't hoping for so long to have it might say, oh no, you take it. You go ahead and have it. But that's uncommon. Typically, the first person to see it or say that they want it is the one who will end up taking that home. There were a couple of unspoken agreements, you might say, meaning that we didn't say we have rules about this. We didn't say we have these agreements. A lot of it was based on some social norms, and a lot of it is based on being polite and kind and giving and not being greedy. In other words, wanting everything for yourself. But some of these agreements, when we do this, we mean kind of like an agreement, were that you didn't have to bring something to take something. So all of us were at different times in different economic situations. In other words, at different times we had more or less money that we had to take care of our families. And so sometimes you might not have anything to bring to trade. It didn't matter. You could still take things. In fact, at that time, you might take more things. At other times, you might bring something and someone else doesn't have something to trade with you. And we never traded directly. In other words, it was never like, I'll give you this book for that shirt. It wasn't a direct trade or a direct exchange. We just put everything out in the middle of the floor or table, and everyone took what they wanted, keeping in mind these ideas of being thoughtful of what other people might want. And I can say that for me and for my family, with my two young daughters at that time, these were really social gatherings that were a lifesaver for me. We call an event or something we experience a lifesaver when it's something that really, really helps us in some way. And for me, these particular get-togethers or gatherings were not only times when I might get much needed clothing or something for my children, shoes, whatever, but also time to spend with other people who had a similar life experience as I did, and time that my kids from like 1 to, 10 or something, had time to get together with the other kids that were there. My kids were among the youngest, and so they were almost always there. Some of the older kids were not there all the time, or if kids were with their dad for the weekend, they might not be there. But my kids were almost always there, and so it was a nice time for me to have kind of a little help with my kids, even though it wasn't like I had a babysitter and could leave. It just was a time when we were with a community, and it was very, very helpful. It was also something that for me, the way I viewed myself, my self-esteem was also very positively impacted at this time, or it really helped me with my self-esteem. So I can remember one incident in particular. There was another young woman in this group, and I wore my ball cap today because she would often wear a ball cap when we would get together for different things. And I always loved that she would wear her ball cap in a ponytail. We call this a ponytail. And I thought, wow, she always looks so beautiful. And I really looked up to her. Like, I really thought she was fabulous. She was great. And one time at one of the clothing exchanges, she had a pair of jeans or pants or something that she wasn't going to wear anymore. And she was like, Tanya, you should take these pants. I think you would look great in these pants. And I was like, I'll never fit into those pants. They're going to be way too small for me. I'm too big for those pants, which in American culture is not considered a good thing. And thankfully, this is changing a little, not a lot, but thankfully we're starting to accept lots of different body types for women. At this time, for sure, a smaller body type was the correct body type. Obviously, there's not a correct body type. But she said to me, Tanya, what do you mean you won't fit in these? We have exactly the same butt. And I was like, no, you have a much smaller butt than me, which, by the way, saying this kind of, talking like this, women wouldn't, well, depends now maybe, but at that time it was just starting to be okay, accepted for women to use this kind of crude or rude language. It was probably getting more accepted a little earlier, but for me, I was in a time when to speak out this boldly was not something I did a lot. Anyway, so she said, come here, come to the mirror. And she brought me over to the mirror and we stood side by side, both of us with our butts right next to each other to look in the mirror. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have exactly the same butt. And I have always thought of her as much more beautiful than me, much more physically attractive than me, much thinner than me, because again, at this time, being thin was almost equal to being physical attractive, I should say. And this was a big eye-opening experience for me. When we say something is eye-opening, we mean we have a big awareness, a huge understanding that we did not have before. And I wouldn't say this was the very beginning of the change of a more positive self-esteem, a better, what we would say now today, a better body image. This isn't something we talked about when I was a young woman, but this was kind of the beginning of when I was hearing about these kinds of things. And I can say this really changed my life in a very positive way. That I could look upon myself in a much more positive way. And I share this story, of course, so that you can learn English and have this comprehensible input, but also to give you the opportunity to think about the way that you view yourself, and that there are many, many types of beauty, many bodies that are beautiful, many minds that are beautiful, many beautiful thoughts, many beautiful lifestyles. And this for me was such an important part of my journey through life. This time of my life, spending time with these women and learning so much about myself and how I wanted to live my life, is a time when I have a lot of fond memories, or in other words, very good memories. And it really was a time that I developed even more my interest in women's issues and empowering women. You asked for it, so I created it. My new We Speak Fluency membership is now open for women and men who have an intermediate level of English and want to be more fluent. If you'd like to take classes with me on Zoom, join conversation groups, and have a platform where you can chat 24/7, this is the membership for you. Look for the link in the description below so that you can get more information and join us in the We Speak Fluency Club. I'll see you in class. Right now, I'm offering a special discount for new club members, so look for the code below. If you're interested in learning more English with a story like this one, and you haven't seen the first story yet, or you'd like to review it, I suggest you watch that one next, and I'll see you there. Bye-bye. Lay all of, let's see, lay or lie? Chickens lay. The moms